Welcome to Kids Academy.
Hi and welcome to the Kids Academy chess course. My name is Robert Lazorchak and I'm a certified teacher with international and national chess teaching certifications. I will be your guide as we begin to master this great game. Now let's get to the chess. In today's lesson, we're going to learn about the knight. In some languages, they call the knight the jumper or the leaper because the knight can do exactly that. It has a special power that nobody else can do. Not the queen, not the rook, not the bishop. The knight's special power is that it can jump over pieces. But before we get to the jumping, let's first learn how the knight can move. Now I'm going to show you two different ways that the knight can move, or I'll teach you two different ways. The first is called the L method, and this is the way that most chess teachers teach the knight. The knight can go step, step, turn, and the movement resembles an uppercase L. Step, step, turn, a capital L. The knight can go down 2 and then step to the side 1. The knight could also make a sideways L, step, step, turn, an upside down L, step, step, turn. If you think of it, this L looks like it's standing on its head. It's an upside down L. This knight, another way to think of it, is that because knights can jump, and because they're animals that live on a farm, we can pretend that this knight is surrounded, enclosed by a fence. And another way to think about the knight moving is that this knight can jump over the fence and go to the square on the opposite color. So if this knight is on a dark square, it is allowed to jump over the fence and go to the nearest light square. Jump over the fence, go to the light square. You'll also see this is an L shape, step, step, turn, or step, step, turn. But another way to think about it is the knight jumps over the fence and goes to a square of the opposite color. So whichever method you prefer to count out your knight moves, step, step, turn, or you can imagine there's a fence that the knight jumps over. The knight always, whichever method you use, the knight always goes to a square of the opposite color. So if the knight is on a dark square, all of its choices will be light. If the knight is on a light square, all of its movements will end up on a dark square. Now let's do some of these knight movements and let's see how many we can find. We already named a couple. We said step, step, turn. So here's one. I see an L, step, step, turn. Here's a second one. Step, step, turn. Here's a third one. Notice they're all squares on the opposite color. This knight is on E5. That's a dark square. All the squares we're finding for the knight to move to are light. Step, step, turn. D3. Step, step, turn. I'm starting to see a pattern here. F3. The knight can go to G4. Step, step, turn. That's a sideways L. If it helps, I'll even draw the fence around the knight. And we listed all of these squares so far. The last two, F7, G6. This knight, if it's in the middle of the board, can attack 8 squares. It's a pretty strong piece. It can attack 8 squares. Some chess teachers call this knight an octopus knight because an octopus has 8 tentacles going in all these different directions, just like this knight. This knight is attacking 8 squares in many different directions. What if we put this knight on the side of the board? If this knight ended up on H5, does it still attack 8 squares? No, it doesn't. Let's count them together. So I see the knight is on a light square. So every square it goes to must be dark. I'm going to draw the fence. And I'm going to count out my L, step, step, turn. We can go here to G7, to F6, to F4, and to G3. This knight on the side of the board can only go to 4, only half as many. So knights don't really like being on the edge of the board. In fact, there's a saying in chess, a knight on the rim is dim. A knight on the edge of the board can't do nearly as much as a knight in the center. It only can influence half the number of squares. But do you know where knights really get sad? They do not like being in the corners because a knight in the corner can only attack 2 squares. That's not very helpful at all. So let's go back. Here's our knight in the middle of the board. He can attack 8 squares, moving in an L shape. Now let's go back to its special power, its special ability. This knight is able to jump. The knight is the only piece that, one, is able to jump over other pieces, and it can jump over its own color pieces as well as enemy pieces. And this knight is the only piece that can change direction in the middle of a turn. Step, step, turn to the side. Everything else moves in straight lines. So here's a knight. I will put a rook here, and I'll put a black rook here. Now this knight can absolutely capture this black rook. Even though this rook is kind of in the way, thinking about step, step, turn, the knight can just hop over and capture the rook. Even if there's a black piece in the way, we can put a bishop here, and we can put a rook over here. This knight can once again jump over. Step, step, turn. Now, you don't capture the enemy piece by jumping over. If I were to jump over you, you'd be safe, you'd be fine. But if I were to land on top of you, well, then you'd be hurt, then you'd be captured in chess. Same thing in chess. If you jump over a piece, that piece remains on the board. But if you land on a piece, that is how knights capture. And going back to the rule we spoke about earlier, you can never capture more than one piece per turn. So you definitely don't capture the piece you jump over. Knights capture the piece they land on. Okay, let's put a bishop here, and let's put a bishop here. In this game, which bishop can the knight capture? If it helps, you can think about the box and the knight jumping over to the opposite color square, or you can start looking at your L's, thinking about step, step, turn. Which bishop is the knight aiming at? If you said f8, you're absolutely correct. This knight can move to f8, step, step, turn, and capture that bishop. Very good. Let's put a knight here, and we'll put a rook over here, and we'll put a rook right here. Okay, in this game, which rook can the knight capture? Well, if you said the rook on f5, your L is a little bit too big. This would be step, 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 turn, and that would be 4 squares. Knight can't move that far. They go step, step, turn, 2 and then 1 to the side. So this knight is able to capture the rook on d4. Let's see. What if I want to capture this rook on f7 in 2 turns? What would be a good first move so that on the second turn I'm able to go to f7 and capture the rook? So we know knights can move in an L shape, so I'm going to highlight all these squares. Whoops, there are 8 of them. Step, step, turn. Now let's see, if we go here, does that aim at the rook? No, that's too far. That's not an L away. If we go here, will that aim at the rook? Nope. That's how a rook would capture, going on the rank 1 square. But that's not how knights move. What if we try this square d8? Step, step, turn. If we go to d8, are we now a knight's move away from the rook on f7? Well, let's see. Step, step, turn. It looks like we can capture that rook on our very next move. Same thing with this square e5. If we go to e5 using our step, step, turn idea, on our second move, we can do another L shape standing on its head and go right to f7 to capture the rook. So let's review what we learned about the knight. The knight moves in an L shape, or if you like to think of it as a horse leaping over a fence, it leaps over the fence and goes to a square of the opposite color. The knight has a special power that no one else can do. It can jump over its own pieces and enemy pieces. But remember, the knight can only capture if it lands on top. The knight always changes squares, square colors. So if a knight is on a light square, every move it makes will be dark. And once it reaches that dark square, on its next turn, every square will be light. It always changes colors. So that's it for the knight. It's a lot of people's favorite piece because sometimes it's a little bit tricky and our opponents don't see them coming. We will learn more about the knight in another lesson, but that is how the knight moves. Thank you for watching.
Subscribe to our channel to stay updated on new videos. Find links to our apps in the comments below.